Hello everyone. So, if you are like me, you are glued to your screen as we watch the inauguration of the current President Trump. A lot stood out in his speech, but what we shall be focusing on is his goal to drill baby drill, meaning he seeks to maximize on the USA's oil drills. To be able to achieve this, he then proceeded to opt out of the Paris Agreement again. This action was then preceded by the United States' decision to withdraw from the Loss and Damage Fund Board this past March 4th. So, we shall be exploring what would potentially happen as the United States proceeds with this action. My name is Jacqueline, and I share content to promote environmental awareness. As we know it, the Paris Agreement is a landmark international treaty that aims to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, ideally 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. But what does it mean for the world if one of the largest emitters of greenhouse gases decides to step back? Furthermore, this decision made by the nation with the largest historical responsibility for climate change jeopardizes vital support for vulnerable countries facing irreversible climate impact. Let us explore. First, let's address the obvious. The United States is one of the largest contributors to global greenhouse gas emissions. If the US opts out, the immediate question is, how does this impact the fight against climate change? By the US withdrawing, its climate policies no longer align with the global roadmap. Then, this creates a significant gap in the emission reduction targets needed to prevent catastrophic climate change. Remember, the Paris Agreement isn't just about cutting emissions. It's also about funding climate adaptation in vulnerable countries. The United States has been a major contributor to the Green Climate Fund, and now without its support, especially after the funds from USAID, various nations that had been dependent on the same to adapt to climate impact have to seek various alternatives. So, what about the economy? How does withdrawing from the Paris Agreement affect the United States and global economies? Opting out can make US industries less competitive. Globally, renewable energy and green technology are booming markets. By stepping away, the US risks being left behind in the race for clean energy dominance. Moreover, countries within the Paris framework may potentially impose carbon tariffs on imports from nations that do not adhere to climate commitments. This could inevitably affect the United States' exports and strain international trade relationships. Beyond the environmental and economic effects, a US exit could have significant diplomatic consequences. The Paris Agreement is essentially recognized as an international agreement, and so opting out signals a lack of commitment to global cooperation. This can erode trust and make other nations less willing to collaborate with the US on any other international issues. However, we do understand that the country is referred to as a superpower as it has a higher economic muscle, and so for this we shall have to see how it plays out. Additionally, the agreement relies on unity. One country stepping out, especially a major player like the US, could inspire other nations to follow suit, weakening the agreement as a whole. Now, let's zoom in on the domestic front. How would this decision potentially affect the US internally? This is quite a conundrum, as some states and cities have already committed to upholding the Paris goals independently and have programs in place to continue reducing emissions, even if the federal government steps back. This could create a bit of misalignment regarding the implementation of climate action across the country. Moreover, public opinion matters. With the growing awareness about climate change, a withdrawal might spark backlash from citizens, businesses, and even investors who prioritize sustainability. Now, let's shift our focus onto businesses. What roles does the private sector play in this scenario? Many US companies were already transitioning to greener practices prior to the reversal of the federal policy, as they saw the economic and reputational benefits of sustainability. Corporate commitments to net zero emissions were on the rise. Because of this, efforts made prior to the recent amendment, the private sector could in fact act as a counterbalance to federal inaction. But this isn't a replacement for strong national policies. Now, from a global perspective, the decision may either have a positive effect where nations would seek to affirm their stance on climate policies, or instead, a negative effect where they may water down their efforts towards transitioning. As for developing countries, the absence of US leadership could mean fewer resources for climate adaptation and mitigation. However, it might also inspire them to seek new alliances and funding sources. So, what can be done to mitigate these impacts? Engagement is always an option. Future administrations could rejoin the Paris Agreement and regain credibility by committing to ambitious climate goals, but this would only apply in the next 4 years. And by then, we shall only be a year away from analyzing the progress made on the SDG goals. As for the grassroots movements, they remain to have a powerful voice. Youth-led climate strikes and activisms can push governments and businesses to prioritize sustainability, even in the absence of federal leadership. In summary, a US withdrawal from the Paris Agreement will have far-reaching consequences environmentally, economically, and diplomatically. But it is not the end of the road. The world has shown resilience and adaptability in the face of such challenges before. The fight for a sustainable future requires all hands on deck: governments, businesses, communities, and individuals. Let's stay informed, stay engaged, and keep pushing for change. Thanks for tuning in. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. How do you think the world should respond now that the US has stepped back from its climate commitment again? Until next time, take care and stay green. For more insights, check out the greenrevolution.ke page on Twitter and Instagram. Together, we can be part of the solution. Bye.